Hey everyone, welcome to Eat, Train, Be Inspired. Today I am bringing on our very first guest, and I want to set her up with a little bit of philosophy that comes from my own training philosophy. So let me pull that up here, guys. Alright, so oftentimes in our lives, we have competing interests that prevent us from perhaps getting our training done, perhaps training's in the way of spending more family time or doing a project around the house, right? We have day jobs, we experience stress throughout all of it, and we need to be able to manage it. So one way I like to put this to people, and having dealt with other people in my life and myself and all the amount of stresses that we can go through, I came up with this analogy. A lot of times I'd go along with an analogy like a plate, like putting so much on your plate. I think commonly we do use that in our language as like a euphemism, right? Some sort of analogy that we just talk about in passing. But as I've observed people handle stress over the years, I've thought of it more like a cup rather than a plate. Because a cup has a bit of a set amount of volume. And the reason I like that is because like the toughest thing you've ever been through is the toughest thing you've ever been through. I don't think there's any real scale of bad to worse. I mean, we definitely look at it that way because there's many scenarios that could be worse. But the hardest thing you've ever been through is the most stress you've ever been under. And the crazy thing about endurance sports is that we put ourselves under a significant amount of stress. You know, I've been in relationships that weren't good and unhealthy to be in. I'm glad that I got out of them, but it was very difficult while in them to manage stress outside of that because it consumed so much of my brain bandwidth every day. I definitely went to bed tired, and it was not healthy to stick around. That's just my own personal experience. There are many, 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 many aspects of personal things that we go through. And I found it was very difficult to handle the personal things and still be able to get a beneficial training response when I'd go out on the bike. I kept finding my times getting slower and slower and slower, and it wasn't necessarily because I was overreaching per se. It wasn't perhaps that I was being inconsistent, because I definitely trained more then than I do now. But I was basically pedaling backwards. And my progression was stopping because of how much personal stress was happening. And you have to think about stress in two ways. There's distress, which is the negative that we often feel and associate stressful situations with. But we also have eustress, right? That good stress that helps to benefit us and stretch us. Either way, it is stress, and there is an amount of stress that you can handle and still have benefit from, right? I found out that people who live over 100 years old oftentimes have a significant amount of stress in their life, but not so much that they dwell in it and live in it forever. And those that overstress, too much stress becomes detrimental to their longevity and their livelihood. The reason I'm talking about so much lifestyle here is that cycling is a lifestyle in a way, right? We need to balance our lives just a bit in order to get the best training response that we can. Okay? Everybody has 24 hours in a day. So there's a finite amount of stress that your stress cup can contain So long story short, the analogy is this. You can fill this cup up with a liquid, a stress, right? And you can do so and still have the table rock and not spill. Now, some people experience such stress and distress just comes pouring in that it fills up that cup to the brim, and they try to handle that best that they can, but when the when the foundation becomes unstable and the table starts to rock back and forth, that liquid is going to spill. It's going to overflow and create chaos throughout their life instead of being in the order and structure of the cup. So the big key here is that you want to be able to manage your stress so that when the boat starts to rock and that table starts to shift, you can adequately handle this stress that is on your plate, or rather in your cup. So yeah, so one tool is we don't want to take on too much. We don't want to spill the contents of our cup and create chaos in our lives. This affects the quality of our actions and of our intent, right? Just like when I was going through a hard time, it was difficult to make a training adaptation. And I'm sure that everyone has experienced that to some degree. You don't want to become distracted by the imbalance of your priorities. Okay? That's something that we need to manage. Now, how we manage our time, our efforts, and our stress levels across life can really be a bit of a puzzle. We have to juggle our training with family, with our careers, with church and service obligations, with children's needs, with the expectations of our spouse, M+1 up to us, right? How well your body can handle the stress is really going to determine how much you can get done and still reach the results that you want to reach, especially in cycling or any endurance sport for that matter. And this can also affect your day-to-day tasks. So we want to create a disciplined approach to our stress management and our time management, okay? And one tool I thought that would be useful is to call upon my friends who are hypnotherapists, and some of their goals and expertise with people are to be able to change your perception on certain distress and to help you manage it. They can help with pain tolerance, which we all know we could probably use that in endurance sports, making some heavy, high intensity workloads. We want to be able to get through those. But there's so many tools that they've got available that we don't really tap into when we're talking about physiology and training response. But part of my philosophy here is that it's, you are a whole person. Your life is far more in-depth, complicated than just cycling and training on the bike. You have family, you have a career likely, you have your own set of beliefs, and you manage stress in your own way. So the best thing I feel like I can build a foundation here for you as this podcast goes on and on through the years is to kind of lay some foundations that are these lifestyle changes that you can work with to become a better person and an athlete. I would do you a giant disservice if I did not help you work on both of those aspects as a coach. And so I'm bringing in some backup, and I'm going to introduce to you Shelley Wallstrom. Actually, I'll let her do some introducing herself, because she already has found the words to her story, why she got into hypnotherapy, and I think you're going to find it to be quite inspiring. All right, and again, welcome to Eat, Train, Be Inspired.
Winter sure gets under my skin. The sinking cold. I can't wait for it to end. When spring comes, I want to bring everything back into focus and try harder. I want to reach a new peak. That way, when the sun rises and the mountain flowers bloom, I can have some light and clarity. They say that the early bird gets the worm. So I get to it. I hop on my bike and start riding. To places I've never been. Sometimes I ride for me. Sometimes I ride for my friends. Sometimes it's all about the sure will to perform. When other people are resting, I'm the one pushing myself to the limits with an insatiable will to drive forward, to stand the test of time and live my life to the fullest. When that spark starts, I'll let it burn till the embers glow brightest.
Welcome back, everyone, to Eat, Train, Be Inspired. I am here with Shelley Wallstrom, one of my very dear friends. We were just talking about how she's one of my adopted mothers, and I would adopt her to play any role in my family because she's just amazing. Her whole family's amazing. Her children and I were very close growing up, and therefore Shelley and I are very close. In fact, Shelley, you don't know this. This is how close we actually are. My favorite color comes from Shelley, was influenced by her.
What?
Yes. So when I was a teenager, I'd always loved blue. I'd always loved green. These were my dad's favorite colors. Pardon. And when I moved to town, I noticed her garage had this big giant sunshine on it. And she was doing this thing, kind of a side hustle called Sunshine Generation. It was a program for kids, am I right? And I remember...
Right, absolutely.
And I remember you telling me that your favorite color was yellow because it was the color of sunshine, and sunshine makes you happy. Is it still the case?
You're right. Yep.
Yeah. And I go, you know what? I like this yellow jersey thing too, but I like sunshine. And and yellow has made me happy ever since. And so, like, not Yellow Card, Coldplay came out with Yellow, and that was like my favorite song for a while. And so, I love yellow.
I love that, Tyler. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now we're a little closer.
That's true. I agree.
All right. Well, so like I said in the last segment, I wanted to bring Shelly on to introduce us to the concept of hypnotherapy. Now, I'm in Boulder or thereabouts, and people love this kind of thing. and I've actually found that there are some really effective tools, and I've used this at different points in my life, and I've had a little bit of benefit from it, and I probably need a lot more work with it here in the future. So Shelly also has her own line of supplements, different from what mine are, and we'll talk more about that. And you've also written a book, so we want to bring that in too. But Shelly, why don't we start with you telling us about how you got into hypnotherapy and what it is for you.
Oh, I would love to, Tyler. And I was thinking, I know that you are big into bicycling. I love to bicycle, and I used to race when I was younger. I also done triathlons. I've also done 5Ks, and I was never at the collegiate level or that level, a professional. But it was always interesting to me that as you look at the person who took first place and the person that took 10th place, in the big races, they win by milliseconds. It's the toe that passes the line just ahead of somebody else. It's not big increments when you're talking a professional race or even any race, but first place to maybe even 10th place could be won in seconds. Correct?
Yep.
So what is the difference? What gets that person to first place and that person to 10th place? There's something that lets those top performers hit that level. And that's what I want to talk about, is how when you start making changes in your life they can be milliseconds to increase just that little bit of much is what can take you from where you are here to the top of your game. It's not big, drastic overhauls. It's little tiny things. And that's kind of where I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And how do I know all this stuff? Right? Well, I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I'm also a certified addiction recovery mental health nutrition coach. I specialize in amino acids. My business is called Feed Your Brain, Change Your Life. And what that looks like is feed your brain, which is your neurotransmitters that fire your happy, calm, feel good chemicals, nutrition, just like you said, Tyler, and hypnotherapy. You put them all together, it brings optimal health. Just like Tyler said, I just finished a book in 2020 called Feed Your Brain, Change Your Life, and Take Control of Your Brain, Body, Emotions. And it talks about how all three of those things work together. It was interesting. One time I was speaking at a conference, and a lady was walking by, and she stopped, and also she looked up and she said, amino acid, nutrition, and hypnotherapy. Now that's an odd combination. How do they come together? And how do they work? That's what I want to talk about today. That's what Tyler and you and I have kind of talked about, is how powerful, and what control do we have over our bodies? And to take control of the things that we can make the most benefit from. We're going to start out with hypnotherapy. It doesn't matter where you start out. You can start with the brain, with nutrition. You can start with the thoughts. They all are interconnected. But right now, we're going to talk about hypnotherapy. And it's interesting to me because when I first became a hypnotherapist, people would say to me, ask me what I do, and I tell them, but sometimes they'd look at me like, oh my gosh, she is going to read my mind or she's going to control my mind. And I would say, yes, if I could control anybody, I would want to control my teenagers, my daughters when they were teenagers. And if I could read somebody's mind, I'd want to read my husband's, I think. It's not about mind reading, and it's not about control, right?
Right.
It's totally about hyper focus. Hypnosis is scientifically proven, but you're in a hyper focused state is what you are when you're in hypnosis.
Okay.
It's not mind reading. It's not mind control. It totally is becoming hyper focused. So, Tyler, just like I asked you, and many of you, those of you who are listening, if you've ever driven somewhere and you get there and you go, I do not remember how I got here.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before. Yeah. Golly, I made it from Salt Lake to Roy, and I have no recollection of it at all. All I know is that I got home safe. Woke up the next morning.
And isn't that kind of crazy when you think about it? Because really, you know that you had to have been watching the road somehow because you were driving and you got there safely. But
well, I mean, I can guarantee I was not drinking.
No, I can say that too. I'll vouch for you, Tyler. But you've got your present thought, which is here. You've got your when you're in autopilot, hypnosis, when you're back in deep different thoughts. It means you're not in the present moment. You're not paying attention to what's focusedly going on, right? We go in and out of hypnosis throughout our life. The other thing that if I asked you is if you had a phone and you're so enthralled with what's going on the phone, or you're watching TV and somebody starts to call your name and they think you're ignoring them because you're not talking to them, and yet you don't even hear them.
I mean,
right?
my poor children. All the time. That's exactly it.
Right, and we all do it. So that means we flow in and out of hypnosis all the time. Most people think hypnosis as a show, right? Because they've only seen it on the show. Mm-hmm. So you go to an entertainment and you watch these people go into hypnotic state. They pull them on stage and they do crazy things. Well, the key to understanding this is, yes, most of them are in a hypnotic state. Not all of them. Some of them are good at faking it, but eventually they get called out and they get sent back down. But if you're somebody who doesn't like the limelight, you don't like to be up in public, you would never allow yourself to go to a hypnotic state deep enough to be fit to go on stage. Mm-hmm. It truly is for entertainment. Those people are up there, love to be up there. They like the limelight. They like the applause. They like all of that. And it makes it even funner because they can do it in a hypnotic state. And they let their unconscious come out and take over.
I'd probably get along with that. I'm a little bit daydreamy to begin with, and I don't mind the limelight. It's kind of fun.
Oh, you'd have a great time up there, Tyler. I did. The first time I did hypnosis, or when I was introduced to it, I went there to be entertained and end up being the entertainment because for me, it was fun to be on stage, and it just felt like I was having this wonderful. I got done, and I felt so rested and so wonderful. I kind of floated off the stage. It was just a great feeling. So I know you, Tyler, and you would love it. It's fun. It's a lot. It just makes it fun. But that is the fun side of it, right?
Right.
So let's talk about what's going on then in hypnosis. Okay. You've got two parts of your brain. You've got your conscious, which is about 10 to 15% of your thought processes. And it's the same for everybody. I'm going to get up. I got to go to work. I got to get dressed. It's your goals. It's your willpower, right?
Yep.
Those are conscious thoughts. The subconscious is all your memory, your emotions, your beliefs from today back to forever. Okay, some people call it spirit, some people call it a soul. And that is going to be different for everybody, right? And the thing is when we're children, you've been around children, Tyler. I talked about that, right? You've got little kids, and I do. I've got grandkids now, which I love. But when they're really tiny, they're going to believe every single thing you tell them, right?
Right.
And not every story that they believe are told is true, right?
Right.
Well, your subconscious also believes everything you tell it, or it accepts every story that it accepts. But not every story it accepts is true. So the challenge comes when your subconscious job is to keep you safe and protected, and yet it's keeping you safe and protected from a untrue story, right?
Okay.
And a lot of times we may not know what these stories are, but we can get an idea of it. And how we can get an idea is what we say to ourselves, right?
Right.
Because what you say to yourself is powerful. It's more powerful than anything else. Because what your subconscious hears from you is more important than anybody else's voice, anything it says, right?
That I would agree 100%.
Yeah. And so when something comes up, let's say you want to make a goal, or let's say you want to create something in your life. Could be performance. It could be based on, physical performance, or a job, or financially, or your weight, or the way your body looks, and you set a goal, right? And then you get that negative self-talk. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of this. I'm not smart enough. I've tried this before and it's never going to work. So all of those are those kind of false stories that we've accepted as our truth.
Right. I mean, I do this way too much myself. So, yeah, I mean, my counselor back in college was wonderful. I mean, I wish I could still go to see her. She was just very, very wise and very good with handling my personality. And at the time, I was pretty broken, so it was helpful to have some of these things, because there was I got in this loop of negative self-talk, and that was kind of a byproduct of myself to begin with, and an abuse cycle that was happening. So I had to somehow break the cycle. And I remember one day her telling me that it always takes 9 or 10 positives to outweigh one of those negatives. So we would hate for anyone to get stuck in that negative loop of self-talk. And I definitely feel in order to be productive and to manage our stress, we've got to be able to find some positivity and find some optimism, for sure. Especially these athletes. I mean, I'm not sure if you ever saw the movie American Flyers with Kevin Costner.
Oh, yes. Several times. We'd watch it every single time. Right before the Tour de France would start, we would watch that. Every time right before we do a race, my husband and I would race it. We're bike racers at the time. Every time we had a big race, we'd watch that show. Yeah,
that's actually, my friends would do the same thing. And they're the guys who turned me on to it. Eventually, I just bought. It's like one of the first movies I bought on Amazon Prime, and I watch it every February to get myself amped up for the season. And I love that story, the brotherly story, right? But I always think about, when we're talking about mental toughness and dexterity or mindset or whatever, I always think of the scene where he's got the big projector out, and the older brother is showing the younger brother. See that moment right there? That's where I gave up. That's when I lost, because I gave up in my head. And they always have that family theme of like, I coulda, I shoulda, woulda, all these conditionals of what could have been, and it didn't improve their happiness. I thought that was really a very poignant point to put into a film, because we do talk negatively about ourselves, and yet we need to find a way to become dexterous and overcome that. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to a critical moment in a race, or even just my training rides going up a mountainside, and I go, I can't do this. And my least favorite word is can't. I hate it. Hate that word. I hate that word more than I hate hate. That's a word. Like, if you came to me and told me that you could not do something, I can't do it. I mean, I start to get livid inside. It's one of my what I call my winter soldier trigger words, because I lose it. I just lose it. Especially my kids, they know not to say that in front of me, because I do believe that they're capable, and I do believe they're strong, and I do believe all these positive things about them, and they need to believe that about themselves. So, and that's the same with the clients. You come tell me that you can't, I'm gonna give you an earful and let you know that you can. I believe in you. So,
yeah, that's excellent, Tyler. You know, there's with my clients, there's a list of words that are stinking thinker words, and they're the things that your subconscious will stop moving you forward.
Right. I mean, it's just kind of part of this idea that there's opposition in everything. No matter what we do, we're gonna have to manage the good and the bad. I remember talking about this one time with you, and you gave me a totally new perspective. So I always thought, well, there's opposition in all things. All right, I'm the good guy. Then I should have opposition. I should oppose the bad, right? Because there's going to be bad, so I'll continue to be the good. But I remember you switched my mindset on that to, well, if something bad's happening, there can be good too, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the thick of it.
Right. There has to be both. Opposition all things means there has to be a balance. And most of the time, like you said, Tyler, we're over here in this good side thinking, well, I want to be over here. I don't want to look at the bad, right, or the hard. Yet, when we're in this hard, why are we not looking for the good, right? Mm-hmm. So even when life is hard, there's still got to be some positive, some good going on at the same time, right?
Yep.
And where your focus goes, that's where your energy flows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't like to be wrong as human beings, and so if we are in a belief system, and even if it's a broken I call it a software program because it's like a broken software program, right?
Yeah.
And when we're in that broken software program, we're going to look for things to validate why I'm not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. Or why I'm not capable, or why I can't do something, because we're going to find evidence, right?
Right.
But what if you turn it the other way and put your energy on the positive, on the opposite, and found justification of why that is a truth?
Sorry, now you got my wheels turning.
I know, I can see it. I can see it in your eye. And that doesn't mean we're not going to take away all the bad, but you can weather the storms based on where you are, and how powerful your strength is in your thoughts.
So this all kind of boils down to how you justify your perspective during your experience.
Absolutely.
On the right track?
Right. And a lot of times you are on the right track. And, you know, we talked about in your story about how when you were sprinting and you fell, right?
Yeah.
And it became a big thing, not because you have a picture of it, right?
Oh yeah. Now, just for everyone listening, I do have probably an 8x11 printout that my ex-wife made of this totally epic picture. Now, at that point in our marriage, we were totally happy, and she was supporting me in my bike racing, and I would show up to the Ogden Depot cash criteriums every week, and we had one friend who was a photographer. And I had moved up the ranks really quickly, so I was starting to race really experienced guys. And someone else had also progressed along with me. And long story short, the final bend curved slightly to the right. as you come up to the finish line. And so I took this final corner ahead of everyone else by a couple seconds, and I was just trying to hold on for the finish line. Well, I decided that if I got into the gutter, I could stay there and everyone would be forced to come around me and come into the wind, and I could win. Well, I started getting past right at the last second, like last 150, 100 meters. Like, we're really close. And this other inexperienced racer that was in my same level came between me and the curb, threw me off balance. Meanwhile, our photographer friends following the finish with this camera, got just slide by slide. And I crashed into some decorative rocks. Had a couple of lacerations that were deep, but nothing, no broken bones, thank goodness. But I just kind of slid through the rocks, picked up the rocks, started throwing them, and dang it, I didn't win. It was like a 3-year-old. And I just want to add one more piece that I didn't share with you, is that my friend at the time, who was the chief referee at the race, she's got a little bit of that biker hard-nosed attitude to her. She's really very frank and very sincere, and so she's one of those people I really jive with and I connect on a deep level with, because I know that she's being honest and real with me. And she at the time was fighting breast cancer and had no hair, and she was wearing her rag, and she looks at me, and the sun is setting in the background, and goes, "Tyler, are you okay?" It was just this most angelic moment. It was really cool. So there was a positive in that. The negative, it was that I had crashed and I was hurt, and it was scary. I was going 30 miles an hour. I remember seeing on my speedometer at the time. We were cruising. And it really hurt for a long time. I was sore for several days. We had an ER doctor that we knew come over and check out the cuts, and it was fine. And here I am reliving it all. See, this is how deep this was. And so what was awesome is that it was a totally epic picture of me sliding on the rocks, my bike in the air, this lady behind me is just like, I gotta find this to post it for you guys. And it was cool. So that my team posted it on the Facebook page. My ex-wife thought it was so cool. She went and got several printouts of it, but it was the only printout of any race I ever did that ended up on our shelf. And so I had to replay and relive every time I looked at it for a long time. And to this day, I still haven't gotten myself up to participating in a sprint. I'm probably doing mentally better, but physically I haven't gotten back up to compete. But I do wonder if I do get to that point where, okay, guys, final lap in the criterium, here we go. Can I hang on and find that podium again? So that's a big thing. And so that's the story of my crash. So sorry to interrupt, but I thought that might need to be clear.
Yes,
we're going to bring it up.
Yep, I love it. And that just leads us into the next thing about what hypnosis does. So we talked about we have the conscious and subconscious. And about 7 to 12 years old, there's a filter that develops between them, okay? And that is when we can judge for ourselves what is real and true for us, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that's not real, we kick out. And everything that is, we allow in, right? But let's take that example, Tyler, you just talked about, right? Is now, from that moment on, you had created a belief that when you're in the final sprint, you can wreck, right? And so you look for justifications, right? I might run into the rock. I might trip over. all these different things, right? Because you've accepted that as a story, right? So what we want to do in hypnosis is change the way you view that. And I've done that with a couple of different people. 2 stories I like to tell because they're performance-based. The first one was I had a cheerleader who was a very good tumbler. And she was very good at doing back tucks. And she wanted that for her cheerleading. And she could do it. She was very good at it, and she had done fine. Well, one moment something happened and she fell doing the back tuck. So it created this fear in her. And what happened is, as she would go to make that stunt and to make that pass, she would hesitate because her brain says, uh-oh, all of a sudden she'd get this thought of, oh my gosh, what if, right? What if the same thing happens again, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of pushing forward, there's that hesitant. And when she'd hesitate, right, it would cause her not to be able to do a back tuck. So in hypnosis, what happens is you go into a state where this filter moves out of the way. Okay? So right now you're awake. The first level down is that walking hypnosis we talked about, where you're on the phone and you're not paying attention, mm-hmm. or you're driving and you don't pay attention, and also you show up and you're like, how'd I get here, right? Mm-hmm. The second level down is meditation, where your brain is just being quiet. And the third level down is catalepsy, and that's where hypnosis happens.
Okay.
And that is where that filter moves out of the way and the conscious and subconscious can talk to each other. Figure out what's going on, right? Well, the thing is as she was in hypnosis, I was able to have her get to that point that she was able to realize that her body knew what to do. She had been doing this since she was a little child, and she was a senior in high school. She knew how to do a tuck. Her body knew what to do. The problem was her mind was getting in the way. It wasn't that she didn't have the ability. Her mind would get in the way, and that would stop her. So by having her walk through every single step of what it was to do a successful tuck, right, and get her into where she would, before she made that tuck or that approach, she had to see the focus and to see it as a win. Rather than letting that negative, that fear come in, it had to be, right here, right now, I am ready, I have the ability, and I could do it. And just one session, I get a video from her mom that Saturday showing me that she was able to do it. And it was just changing that thought process, right? Right. I also had a baseball player who was a senior who had seen somebody get hit with a ball. And he created this fear that, oh my gosh, I just might get hit in the head with a ball. Well, what it did is when he'd get up to bat, he would react, right? And he would back up. And it was such a split second. When we talk about milliseconds, it was such a small movement that he wasn't even picking up on it. But then he would miss the ball, mm-hmm. right? Because he'd have that hesitant and that fear. And when a ball's coming at you 90 miles an hour, that is not the time to have that fear. Just like when you're going 30 miles an hour on a bike, that is not time to have the fear of, I should not be in this state, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a good place for me, right?
Right.
But by letting him see that he had been playing baseball since he was a child, and for him, he'd never even been hit with a ball. He had just taken on that fear, and his body knew what to do. He knew how to play. He knew what it felt like to hit that ball exactly to get a home run, right? Mm-hmm. And he knew that follow through. So when we talk about first place and the first and 10th place, it doesn't mean they don't have the fear, right? It just means that at that moment, like you said, there's a moment when on that show when he said, that's where I gave up, right?
Right.
In that moment, those who win are able to focus on their goal, which is the finish line and winning.
Right. And these moments are what I call critical moments. Mm-hmm. This is the reason we train for critical power, right? We need that power in the moment we need it to succeed at a given task. And so,
right.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like, that's not the time, being in the sprint or being, right there trying to hit the ball. Like, that's not the time to have to think about anything other than the goal at hand, the task that's present, and,
right.
And golly, you brought up something that was really good in our pre-production, was that, in my case, I'd be really worried about the past, and I'd talk myself out of it using past experience, and that's kind of what we've been, the track we've been on. What we're trying to do is be in this present moment, and if we're worried about the future, we can then again talk ourselves out of succeeding in these critical moments.
Right, you're absolutely right. It's that living in that what if, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I talked about, I like to have you close your eyes and, visualize from here back to forever. When you get that little thought, the little tiny thought that the imagination takes over and spirals you into the future, and you create the what ifs. You know what? And most of the time, it's funny to me because it's like, what if I wreck? What if what if something goes wrong? And isn't it kind of funny that we could actually change it to what if I win? But we don't, because we're stuck in this. I mean, it's like, what if everything goes great? And what if we have all this energy? And what if we stay focused? And what if we win? But we don't. We're over here in this what ifs, right? We create this story. And then I asked you, from here back to forever, how many times when you create this story in the future of this what ifs, of something negative happening, we're great at imagining, what percentage of those actually happened? And what did you tell me, Tyler?
Oh, at 0% of the time.
Zero.
It never happened.
Zero.
Right? Just the follow-up to that is, gosh, maybe did I talk myself out of that? So I avoided the situation to begin with. Right, but it's like I have gone into some sprints at least to try to keep up, keep my head up so I'm not crashing. But in those instances where I've got in and I just go, I just need to face this. Yeah, the scenario did not play out. The fear didn't come to fruition. What I find, and this is kind of part of a theme I've got going right now, that faith is a principle of power. And can you put belief in yourself, some faith in your ability to succeed? Of course, there's a religious side of that, and you and I understand that from attending church, but but in a practical application in other world uses of faith, faith and fear are very opposed to each other. That faith cannot exist where faith is. Faith cannot exist where fear is. Likewise, fear can't exist where faith is. So it's really going back to this idea that we need to justify these positives and justify that outcome of winning or succeeding in our task, and not giving much weight, as it were, putting much faith into that fear of failure.
Absolutely. Yeah, yep, exactly. And interesting, Tyler, is that in your central nervous system, you have what's called the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And its job is rest and digest. That is your body's parasympathetic way to relax naturally. Okay? But in the central nervous system, it does not know the difference between excitement and fear or anxiety. Okay? So think about that. When you're getting ready to, let's say get ready to have a race, and this starts to come up, right? How much better would you do if you felt that and turned it to the excitement, rather than, oh my gosh, I have the fear or this anxiety that I'm going to do a race, and the what ifs, but changed it to allow the body to feel that excitement.
I think of my one stint at Collegiate Nationals. We were on our home roads. We were the host school. I don't know if you guys made it down to see that weekend, but that was downtown Ogden, and we did a criterium.
I think we were there. I think we came and saw you.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine you guys not being there, because there were a lot of people, and I remember getting the call up. And I was in the zone for that week. Like, everything I'd worked for years was coming to this. And I remember getting the call up, and you look at the pictures, and I'm just sitting there like a cool cat. Like, I was pumped for this thing. Done everything I could, and I was confident, and I was sure that I could get my teammate the win that day, and then we were going to go back and try to do it with our conference in the road race the next day. And I think back to that criterion. It was an hour and a half. We averaged 30 miles an hour the entire time. A breakaway won, and it was the most crash-ridden race I'd ever been in. So many crashes, and I think I finished 40-something, I thought, of 100 that day, because it was just so crash-ridden, especially on the last lap. And yeah, I think back, and I don't think any of those crashes affected me. None of them got in my head. I was still very confident with about 3 laps to go. I heard someone crash. It was the biggest thud I'd ever heard on a bike. And I'm going, that's it. I'm going to the front. I'm going to stretch this thing out. And by the time I got around to the finish line, I was on the front. I'd strung the whole thing out. And the race was safer because we were going faster, and we were going to go get that breakaway. I was the only person that my teammate had, and I wanted to make sure that he could get in a good position. Well, I came around, and the crowd sees Weber stayed on the lead of the peloton, leading the chase. Whew, everyone's cheering. Big confident booster, right? Well, I got done with that pool. I was done. I was hoping my teammate was in the right spot. Come to find out, the whole time, that big thud, that was him.
Oh, no.
So the poor guy crashed out. Well, the following day, I went and I was warming up with a new friend that I made at Nationals. And so I'll drop his name because he's awesome and everyone will know him. But Robin Carpenter, he's raced the Tour of Utah a bunch of times. He's really good at getting into breakaways. He's still really good at that. He's still racing professional, and at the time he was just a junior in a development team, but still getting paid to do it, you know. And so I was hanging out with him, and we were warming up in Ogden Valley, and the women's race was coming down the North Ogden Divide, which, if any of you've been there, it's really steep on the way up. It's even steeper on the way down the backside, and it is one of the funnest roads you'll ever go on.
Oh, I get it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that day I hit 60 miles an hour, and Robin hit like 63 or something. We crossed the top together, but he dropped me on the descent. It was amazing. That kid was fearless. Well, the women's race was coming down, and me and him were just warming up. And the husband of my teammate pulled alongside, told me that she had been in an accident on the way down. Come to find out, it was her fork had failed on a bump, and so she almost lost her life. Fortunately, her husband, at the time, was a first responder, a fireman, and was able to stabilize her quickly, and they had to life flight her out. Well, when it came time for me to go dive bombing down that divide, I really was scared. I didn't know what had caused it at that point. Maybe it was a bump or whatever. Nobody knew that descent better than her. And for all the training and preparation we put into it, I would never have let Robin Carpenter drop me in my right mind. And I would have stuck with him. I would have given everything I could to stick with him. But the fear convinced me to stop. And so that's something I don't want any client to ever have to feel, because it's those moments where you start to live with a little bit of regret of the what ifs and coulda, woulda, shouldas. And competition, I heard this from a good friend the other day, competition is the killer of joy. And so if you're always competing against those moments, it's no wonder. I mean, bike racing, it's really difficult to win in the first place. You know, you're if everyone was equal and you had a group of 30 people, then your chances of winning would be 1 in 30. But not everybody is equal. We kind of create these hierarchies of who has better fitness and who's got a lighter weight or who's got a better bike. And sometimes that gets in our head, and your chances then are like 1 in 200. You might as well be racing the professional peloton in some instances. You pop right out the back and you're done. You've lost. So it's just one of those things. You can't allow the fear to get into the way of what you are capable of. So I guess going back to this past, future, and present, something you told me was that if you get hung up on the past, it leads to depression, right? If you get hung up on the future, it leads to anxiety. And so the goal then is to be present and to program your brain to be in that moment.
Oh, absolutely, Tyler, because that's where you're in the present moment. That's where your strength is. That's where your talents are. That's where your joy, your happiness is in each present moment. The challenge is that many of us allow our brains, our imagination to take over, and we spiral into the future and we spiral into the past, and we're not ever enjoying the present, right? So we go through anxiety, we go through the depression, and yet those are places that there's nothing we can do about, and it's just wasted energy. So once you're aware of it, it's just like exercising. Your body becomes stronger with exercise. Well, your mind becomes stronger when you realize how much power you actually have to bring it back into the present moment. So as it starts to work, go to the, oh my gosh, what if this happens? Right here, right now, everything is just fine, right? Or, oh, remember in the past, this is what happened, and then that depression. No, right here, right now, everything is just fine. And the more you do that, the more strength you have to keep you into that present moment, which is where you're going to find that joy and your power and your strength and the ability to win if you're using this for performance basis.
Okay, so I'm thinking about your triangle. Like where does this all fit in? So far, are we like talking more about the thoughts, or have we just been talking more about the brain? I'm trying to kind of bring this around to your nutrition as well. Like how does... Sorry, that's probably the follow-up question, but like where does the nutrition fit into this? But I don't know, where have you seen kind of where we've been in this conversation?
Well, it's interesting, Tyler. I like the way you brought this in, is the fact that, our thoughts, we started this whole thing with stress. You were talking about stress and how we can only hold so much stress, correct? Mm-hmm. Well, your thoughts are only a part of it, right? But in your brain, you have what's called neurotransmitters, and those are your happy, calm, feel-good chemicals. Mm-hmm. And I became aware of this for two reasons. The first one was I became a hypnotherapist, and I would work with clients, and they would see results. Well, I'd have a few of those clients that would come, and they had the desire to make the change, and I'd work with them. They seemed to do well. They come back the next week, and it was like I hadn't done anything. So I'd work with them again. I think, hey, they're making progress, they're doing well. And then they come back as like 51st dates. And I kept thinking, what is the missing link? There's something here that isn't emotional, but not allowing them to make a change. At the same time, I have a daughter who's an addict. And at age 6, she had anxiety. And I did what all moms did, took her to the doctor, got her some medication, thought everything would be fine. But age 15, she came to me and said, Mom, I'm tired of being a doctor's science project. I want to feel normal. And unfortunately, her normal was to use drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse until she ended up on meth. And meth is the drug of the devil. It literally changes every bit of you. And I began to live in fear that she was either going to kill herself, kill somebody else, or in jail. And when she went to jail, for the first time, I was actually relieved, thinking, oh my gosh, she's finally in a place that I can sleep for the next few nights, not worry about her. Mm-hmm. And my thought was, well, she'll get out and she'll be clean, because I don't know about you, Tyler, but if I ever went to jail, I'd never have to go back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be there in the first place. Yeah, right.
Took that off, I don't have to do that again, right?
Yeah.
So I started watching addicts, and I started watching this cycle. And they had this desire to stay clean. So they'd stay clean for about 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. And all they're doing is white knuckling it, and then they start to relapse, and then they end up in jail again. And what I've learned about addicts is, first, they don't want to be one. Second of all, they're just self-medicating, usually for something either in the past or something, anxiety, depression, right? And they're just white knuckling it, meaning if they're staying off drugs and alcohol, they're not doing anything about it. They're just holding on, right?
Holding on, yeah.
And
It's
so
a very
I
real
just
issue.
prayed. I prayed and said, God, Heavenly Father, I need an answer because I'm gonna lose my daughter. And I learned about how they were using. 2 days later, there was a show on about how they're using amino acids, specific ones for the brain, through an IV. And by giving these specific neurotransmitter or these amino acids, which literally is our brain food,
Right.
they're literally feeding the brain. What happened is after 3 days, their cravings for the addiction started to go away, and after 10 days, it was completely gone, and they have an 85% rate of recovery. It's phenomenal, but it's $1,000 a day, and I'm like, wow, okay, if that's my only option, okay, but maybe some supplements would work. So I'll just give her a bunch of supplements, and luckily a wise friend of mine said you can't just throw amino acids at somebody, you need to understand them. And so I Googled amino acid therapy for addiction through supplements, and I found on Google, I found an addiction center in Florida, and I called them and said, look, I have clients that I feel like their brain's missing something, and I have a daughter, and I feel like amino acids could be your answer. What can you teach me? And he's like, you know what? I could teach you everything you know, but in 2 weeks, I have a training in Salt Lake City, and you'll learn everything you need to know. Now, to me, that was an answer to my prayer. And when I went, I realized that, oh my gosh, you know what I'm learning, yes, can help an addict, a hardcore addict. But yet, what about that child who is struggling with focus or anxiety at a young age, or the teenager that is struggling with social anxiety, or obsessive thoughts, or self-hatred, or the adult who has to have sugar or caffeine to get going in the day, or can't sleep. And what I realized is, yes, what I learned could help this bit, but yet there's a whole population of people that it's not just an emotional thing, it's actually a chemical in the brain where the neurotransmitters stop being fed, and amino acids literally feed the brain, feed those neurotransmitters. And what you're doing is you're balancing the imbalanced brain by taking these specific amino acids. And so when you start to do that, the cool thing is if you need them, you're going to feel a difference within 20 minutes or less. So you don't have to wait a long time, period. But what happens is when those neurotransmitters become depleted, there's serotonin, dopamine, GABA, endorphins, we look for something to make us feel better. Sugar, starches, alcohol, drugs, behaviors such as gaming, gambling, pornography, something to fill a void, right? Because our brain is smart, and it says, I want something, I want it now. And so we go looking for it in those different substances. And yet there are specific amino acids. An amino acid is just a building blocks of protein. You either get it from food, your body creates it, or you get it from a supplement to actually go in and start to fire those neurotransmitters. So by doing that, it can help. Like GABA, we talked about stress, right? And stress can be it's that physical, uptight, overstressed, can't calm down feeling. Well, that's a sign that your GABA is too low. So by feeding your brain GABA, mine just has to be called GABA Chill, like take a chill pill, right? It calms that, it feeds that GABA, which allows your body to relax naturally. So somebody who's getting prepared to race, or speak or something, and they feel those butterflies, knots in the stomach, I like to call it taming the butterflies. It just allows you to get those under control enough that then you can focus forward. Or if your serotonin's low, you're stuck in that broken software of that, those thoughts that keep going over and over and over and over, right? Which makes it hard, especially for somebody who's a performance-based, to get out of that cycle and go, I can win, but they're stuck in those recurring thoughts, right? And that by feeding the brain the 5-HTP or tryptophan, so mine are called 5-HTP positive mind or tryptophan positive sleep, what you're doing is getting those thoughts to stop, the racing thoughts, right? To stop the negativity, the worry, the depressed, the self-hatred, the OCT thoughts, right? or when somebody's struggling and all they can drink is, they have no energy because they lack focus or energy or drive, could actually be a dopamine issue. Low dopamine, right? That's low dopamine. By feeding it tyrosine, and mine's called Tyrosine Energy Booster. And what you're doing is you're feeding. It converts to dopamine. So you're literally feeding the brain what it needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you got me thinking over here because you're listing off some symptoms that I don't want people thinking our family's crazy, because let me just tell you, our family is about the
I think
most
all
wonderful
families are
environment
crazy.
it's been in.
I'm
Yeah.
good.
But we do have some crazy. And, for one, myself, like, I've been through a good handful of things. We've talked about myself as someone who's been anxious and depressed at different moments in my life. And I'm going, oh my goodness, I could use that one. Let's try the GABA, right? And then you listen off some others, and I go, well, my wife could use that. I've got a boy who struggles with some of these same things. Like, there's a lot of symptoms here that seem quite common.
Right.
Like I told you once, I'm kind of on board with this whole Jordan Peterson philosophy of, the state of existence is misery. And I don't think that that's wrong. I mean, I think the purpose is that we need to figure out how to face that misery. That's kind of my own purpose in life. That once I kind of got my head wrapped around that, most people in a room would probably say that there's some level of ADD or ADHD these days, or a lot of, probably the majority of any given room would say, well, yeah, I feel depressed. From time to time. Maybe I don't meet all the criteria for depression, but yes, I feel some of those at least. I think that's part of being a human, and thank goodness that we do. And here's the opposition thing, right? Thank goodness we can feel those, because then it makes these moments like having our family around. I mean, it makes those things priceless. You could not put a price on my family and the joy that they bring. And really, I'll never stop riding a bike, because I've always find joy in that game, in spite of the challenges of it, right? So, yeah, I don't know, that's incredible. Like, maybe some of these nutrition aspects I've been neglecting. I mean, and yes, I do have my own supplements, but I think I have two that are similar in purpose, but very different in nature from yours. I have one called Calm, and another called Clarity. So Clarity is supposed to help you focus. Calm is supposed to help you calm down. But yours are really just more directly amino acids. And for you physio geeks out there, those really are the building blocks of your brain. These are things that your brain absolutely needs to function. So it makes sense that if we're treating through whichever therapy we prefer, right, to our thoughts, if we're treating our thoughts, it makes sense that we need to take care of our body, and our body takes care of itself through nutrition, and then we just keep that triangle going, one supporting the other. And almost thank goodness that we know that these days, because if there's ever a time where we needed to understand this, today's society is the spot we need it. All right. So, and I love your philosophy, Shelley, because I feel like we have such similar thought processes on this. And I'm going to steal a quote from you, and I'm going to tab it right now. But the whole purpose of both of our philosophies for coaching people in life and in sport, or it's really the optimal health leads to optimal performance. The whole reason I've got a rainbow for all the colors in my logo and all these colors in the background is that I'm trying to help address your complete life, not just one particular aspect. And I touch on that in other episodes that are going to be coming out here soon. But we really need to look at the total person. A metric that's common in cycling right now is your training stress score. But I feel like too many coaches just make little prescriptions for training without ever taking a really good look at someone's life stress. And if we could put a score on that, I really wish that we could. And we're learning more about that too, with sleep tracking and heart rate variability from day to day, and of course this mental health centric thing. So for me, this all starts on the inside, and we need to be able to build pillars of a very wide pyramid. We're not just making a pillar for a two-dimensional view here. You're a three-dimensional person, very complex being and entity. So it's almost more like a pyramid of having to focus on what is across, what's your training, what's your mindset, what's your nutrition, what are you doing to concentrate or to cross train and supplement your training, and can you build that pyramid, and what are those cornerstones that you're going to build upon. So this is really a whole I guess very holistic approach to cycling and endurance sports, and I think that from what you've been teaching me, this is very much along the same lines of it's treating the whole person. It's treating them from the inside out, and really being there as a help to improve the quality of life for an individual. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, Shelley, thank you for coming on to this. I've taken way more time than I probably ought to have, but I'm so grateful that you've been able to do this with us today. So I guess my last question is, how do people get a hold of your supplements and your book, and perhaps in contact with yourself for setting up a hypnotherapy appointment?
You can go to my website, which is hypnoaminos.com, hypnoaminos.com. The great thing is, the very first thing is you get on that, and there's a pop-up. It's could amino acids be your missing link? So there's a quiz to take it. It gives you a better idea of you personally, of how are they something that will help you. So that's the first thing. And then you can order the products on my website. You can sign up for either one-on-one with me, where I go through I have a very extensive nutrition form that I have you fill out, and then we meet one-on-one through Zoom and go through each step of what amino acids could help you, what nutrition you might be lacking, to get them working together, because there's a connection between the brain and the mind when it comes to mental health, brain health. And I do hypnosis either over Zoom or in person. And you can sign those up there. You can get a hold of me through ShelleyJo@hypnoaminos.com, or you can call me, and my phone number is on the website. And like I said before, my book right here, Feed Your Brain, Change Your Life, Take Control of Your Brain, Body, and Emotions. You can get that on Amazon. And there's actually a link to it on my website.
Yeah, I just want to say, I put it in my Amazon cart today, so we'll wait for payday to come around. But even then, it was not an unrealistic price for a book, and so for all the value that's going to be in there, that's probably the most bang for your buck that you can find at the moment, or for any of these psychology books. I'll wrap up and just say thank you again for being there as a friend since I don't know. I mean, almost as long as I can remember. And it's been such a good thing to be able to know that there's someone in my life that I can trust like you, and to have your family be so close with ours over the years has just been phenomenal and such a blessing. And I love each and every one of your daughters, and your husband is, believe it or not, one of my very dearest friends. I don't call him near enough. I probably should annoy him a bit more. But you guys are sincerely incredible, and I am so grateful for you guys.
Well, Tyler, thank you for letting me be on here. You're amazing. I know you even work. I mean, you're full of integrity, and your ethics is amazing, and your passion is phenomenal. And I just love you. Mwah. You're great.
Thank you, my friend. All right, well, we'll catch up soon. We got to do another like guinea pig hypnotherapy thing and see if people can go, oh yeah, that might actually work.
Yep. Sounds like a deal.
And I've got other topics that I think you would have some insight on. So I'm going to go finish your book first.
Okay.
And then we'll hit on it. I'll have so much, but so many questions to ask. But we'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
All right.
Good day.
Bye now.
Whatever it is. Bye-bye.